Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thrive, where I believe you were not created to survive, but to thrive. And if you change yourself, you can change your world. I'm your host, Alex Sagat. Today, I'm really excited about this conversation. It's one that I've been wanting to have for a very long time. The guest that I have with me is not just a guest or a special guest. It really is family. I consider him family. Me and Diana are eternally grateful for his life, for his wife's life, for his family's life. Today, I have none other than Luis Collazo in the building. Louis, what's going on?
What's
up,
brother?
you. I love you. I love you,
bro.
I'm so glad that you're finally here. Come on, man. We finally are making this happen.
This is awesome. It's crazy,
We're finally
but
having
awesome.
this conversation.
Yes.
We've been talking about it for months. It is crazy, but
it's finally happening.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
I do this every once in a while, whenever I try to remember, but I like starting whenever I have a guest with a few moments of just what I call giving flowers or honoring. I just want to honor you. Thank you for being an incredible source of help, of strength, of belief. We're minute one, and this is insane. It is dusty in here. I think a lot of people see us serving together and doing ministry together, but they don't know the backstory, that it's been a long time.
Yes.
Me and Diana got to Calvary in the year 2010. We started visiting. 2011, we started going, continually, because we were working in 2010 on Sundays, so it was difficult. 2012, we got involved and got to meet you and Zori, and you guys, literally, we were new at Calvary, just starting to meet people, and you guys took us in. Literally, how I can describe it is almost like if we were your kids. Yeah. And you guys were there for us, and I cannot thank you enough. You are a stand-up man. You are the real deal. Thank you for loving me and my wife. Thank you for always being there for us. Thank you for believing in us through the ups and downs, through the heartaches, through the disagreements, through the arguments, and then also through some amazing food, some good times, some barbecues. It's been an awesome time serving God with you. And God willing, we continue doing this for a long time. Yes. But I just want to say thank you. I love you and Zori very much. And awesome, I love your story. And I think people see you. I forgot where I was with you just a couple of weeks ago. We went somewhere, or somebody came by the church to see the property or something like that. And I kind of like said, oh, you got to hear his testimony. You got to hear what, like, Louis' story. And I think people see you. And because you are a pastor at church, you're the CFO, people think, oh, this man has been a Christian his whole life. He has no idea what I've been through. And I think people don't know your story. So I wanted to really have this episode so that people can get to know you, especially people, if they come to Calvary and our dream team. If you're watching this and you don't know, me and Diana pastor a church in South Florida called Calvary Church. We have a dream team now, over 500 people on team that are serving, which is amazing. And I think you might see Louis on Sundays and you don't know his story. And today, I want people to get to know you over this conversation. How long have you been at Calvary?
We are starting our 18th year at Calvary. And I am starting my 15th year on staff.
Insane.
At Calvary. I never in my wildest dream. I remember having a conversation with Zora 20 years ago. And in the corporate world, I worked in a very successful company. I was very successful. And I remember telling Zora one day, man, you know what would be so cool is if I worked at church.
Wow.
And Zora said, well, wouldn't that be a dream? Why don't you pray about it? And I remember when God brought us back, God brought me back to church, because I'm one of those guys that was church hurt. I got church hurt. I grew up in a Hialeah church. Yep. Buen Pastor.
Yeah. So crazy story ends up being that you went to the church that I grew up in.
Exactly.
But by the time I got there and I was growing up, you were already out.
We were gone already, and Mercado Santiago was our pastor.
Yeah.
And way back when, there were some issues back then. Probably had to do something where I was really serving the Lord, and then I did a 180 and started selling drugs. It was probably a bad thing. And that's probably, but I came to the Lord when I was 11 years old. And and then I made a 180, and at about 16, 17, and I went off the reservation. But I was going back to what I was saying. Zora and I were talking about it, and I would tell her it would be amazing to work
Wow.
at church.
Wow.
And
now here you are, 15
and now
years.
and I never thought I never thought that I would ever make it in an environment like this because of who I am, my character, and all that. And now, starting in year 18, and I pray.
Wow.
I pray all the time. I said, Lord, let me be part of it. When we were getting this building, I kept saying, Lord, let me get to the promised land.
Wow. Wow.
Don't take me out. Don't take me out of here. And you and I is part of our story that nobody knows. But we had a couple of rough years there too.
Yeah, just
Nobody knew it, but we had a couple of rough years behind closed doors.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I tell people, and we talk about this all the time. God uses our imperfections to perfect one another.
Right.
And I had just recently became the lead pastor. We were navigating, how do we deal with each other? How do we understand each other? Diana was the mediator a lot of times in those meetings.
Translator.
She was the translator. Well, this is what Alex means. Well, Alex, this is what Louis
You guys are
means.
saying the same thing.
Literally saying the same thing. But it was a learning and growing together.
Yeah.
And that's why I thank you. You never gave up on me. I never gave up on you. And we literally are like, we're gonna work this thing out.
Yeah.
And there was also a lot of outside stress that doesn't help in a relationship when you are navigating what we were navigating with. It's a massive church dealing with what we were dealing with. So a lot of it was also pressures that, like when a marriage goes through a situation when there's no money, a job loss, or a health situation, it just adds pressure to the marriage. And that makes communication that much more difficult. But yeah, going back to your story, I know you kind of referred to it, but you did that 180. So you let's go back. You're born and raised in Miami, or you're born in Cuba?
Born in Cuba, left at the age of 4.
Wow.
Lived in
Do
Spain
you still have
for a
memories
year.
of Cuba?
I went back to Cuba in 1979, and that's where I had the memories that I have today.
Okay.
I was too small back then. But yeah, I went to Cuba in 1979, just before the Mariel.
How were you allowed to go back to Cuba and come back?
My mom and I went through a missionary because my grandfather was very sick, so they allowed us to go and visit with him back at that time. Yeah, and it was beautiful. Cuba is beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, me and your son and Phil got to go.
Yes.
And we were there for a week helping out our church over there that we have, Calvary Havana, with Pastor Ricardo. And it is beautiful.
It is.
Obviously, beautiful to see some of the architecture and all that. The people are absolutely beautiful people, and they're full of joy in spite of what they're going through. But so you left at 4.
and we lived in Spain for a year, and then my father's brother, my uncle back then. I don't know how do you say this in English. Nos reclamaron is what you would call it back then.
They claimed you?
They claimed us.
Yeah.
They claimed us. And so we got here in 1971, 1972. 72 because I didn't see the perfect season. So I just missed it.
Yeah, that's right.
So
It's been downhill since then. Not as
all the way.
So then you're growing up in Miami, late 70s, early 80s.
Late 70s, 80s was my decade.
Yeah. Are you in the 70s? Are you a kid who at 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, you were at home with your parents? You weren't out in the streets. That didn't come till later.
That didn't come till later. When we got here and all that, I was a great student. If you see my mom, if you go into my room, my mom had all my diplomas on the wall, which was insane. I was like, Mom, this is so embarrassing. And then I went to I transitioned to the junior high, which was Filer in Hialeah, which in Filer the announcements were the obituaries from the day before. Yeah.
It was a rough school.
Rough. Back then there was still segregation. So we had issues where we had a scenario where your locker, the school was segregated, half by black and white, and there were still fights and so forth back at that time. It was very violent, very violent.
And then at 11 years old, was that 11 that you were watching TV and you heard the gospel?
TBN.
You were watching TBN on TV.
Paul
Crouch.
Yes.
But what happened? What made you like, okay, this makes sense to me. I need Jesus.
I still to this day, I don't. So my mom was in the living room. My mom came to Jesus through me.
Wow.
A couple of years later, and my mom says, I learned this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I was in the room watching my black and white 13-inch TV, and the preaching was going on, and it was about the end times, and I freaked out, I did the prayer.
Wow.
I did the prayer, and I did the prayer. I got on my knees, and my mom says that something happened in my room. She was in the living room, and she looked because there was this light that came out from the door.
Wow.
That there was this bright light that she couldn't figure out what it was. What was I doing in there? And then at the end it says, you need to go and confess that you've accepted Jesus, is what they say. And I opened the door, and my mom says that when I opened the door, she couldn't see me because of the light that was behind me.
Wow.
It was so radiant that she couldn't see my face.
That is insane.
And I told her I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior.
Wow. 11 years old.
11 years old. And by myself in the room. And I went to my next door neighbor, who was a Christian, Pentecostal.
Old school Pentecostal.
Old school Pentecostal. And he gave me a Bible. And I immediately started preaching John 3:16 to all the kids in the neighborhood. We started going to a church. And about 3 weeks after I had given my life to Christ, they had to send a van to pick up all the kids from the neighborhood because everybody got saved.
Wow.
And I literally was doing Bible studies right there and preaching on the sidewalk with them. And and it was insane. Everybody came to know Jesus.
Wow.
And we would go every Friday to a Buen Pastor, to youth.
Yep.
And that was a crazy time in my life. I had fallen in love with Jesus. You know, at the beginning when you meet Jesus, everything, the air that you breathe, the tree, everything is, I couldn't conceive nothing but Jesus.
Wow.
At that time.
It was a real experience. At a young age, but you really had a transformation of like, I understand this gospel.
That was it.
Wow.
That was it. And then I didn't want anything to do with anything that would be sinful. I went to the Pentecostal church with my friend for a few Sundays. A little weird. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it was weird. And then we started attending a Buen Pastor. I started attending a Buen Pastor by myself. There's nobody in my family that's a Christian.
I think you're 12, 13 years old. You're going to this church by yourself.
By myself. It's Friday night. We live in Hialeah.
They're picking you up on the bus.
They're picking me up on the bus, and as I'm walking out of the apartment, my mom grabs me by my hand, and she says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "To youth group." And she says, "Tell me about your Jesus."
Wow.
And it was right there. And this didn't happen with D. I gave her the gospel. I think I was 13 years old. And my mom says, I want that Jesus.
Wow.
So we did the prayer right there on the spot. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. And my mom next month will be 94 years old. And you want to talk about a Christian woman.
Yeah.
Woman
of God.
From that day on, my mom has never stepped to the side or anything, gone to church her entire life. Now she can't.
Wow.
Because she's so old. But she is fresh. Her mind is fresh. She reads her Bible every single day.
And you preach the gospel when you were 13 years old. God can use anybody.
Anybody.
Wow.
Anybody.
So you're going to church, 13, 14, 15, El Buen Pastor, where I ended up growing up. Pastor Melquiades, Santi Esteban, the whole family, amazing. So you're growing up there. While at the same time, now you start going to Filer. And so you start experiencing Miami a little bit, basically. And Miami, we know, in the turn now of 79, 80, 81 becomes Miami.
Yes.
We've seen the documentaries. We've seen the movies. Miami becomes known for cocaine cowboys.
Yes.
It literally becomes almost like the drug capital of the world or of the United States of
America.
America.
It's a new entry point.
And did you feel the change? Did you? Obviously, you're coming into age now too.
Yeah, I'm coming into age, and it's not so much the feel because it was so gradual that I just went along with it. But yeah, so you see that movie, the La Madrina, the Griselda.
Yes, the Griselda.
So
movie.
we saw Zora and I saw that all those movies. I've seen them.
You lived through.
I remember the places.
Wow.
I remember the places being in those places.
Wow. The Mutiny
as a young
Hotel.
kid. The Mutiny Hotel for sure.
Wow.
But I was very young back then. I was 17, 18 years old. But I always had an older demeanor. So when I was 17, people thought that I was in my late 20s, 30 years old.
Yeah.
That's the way that it was.
And so while you're at church, now you start experiencing a little bit of Miami. Did you just start slowly, gradually getting involved? How did you start getting, because you ended up basically selling drugs like you mentioned earlier. How did that happen? Because you were pretty involved. Here you are at 13 sharing the gospel with your mom, but now at 17, 18, life begins to change and you start going to the dark side of Miami. How did that happen? Was it some friendships? Was it wrong crowds? What happened?
My friends were always older.
Okay.
Where my older brother is 8 years older than me. And I always hung out with his friends. I was the youngest one in my family, and I always hung out with everybody that was 8, 10 years older than me. So back in the day, they had work programs. And I would get out of high school. I went to Hialeah, Miami Lakes. And I started when I was like 14 or 15 years old, around that age, I can't be exact. I started in the work program. So I would get out of school 1:30 and I started going, I found a job at a sporting goods store right next to my house. And that sporting goods store, the owner was an amazing dude. I loved him to death. He was like a big brother to me. But, there were a lot of things going on back in those days and things like that. And I slowly, like a slow fade, I slowly started getting wrapped up in that type of, I remember doing my first, I think I was like 16 years old when I snorted cocaine for the first time in my life.
Was that around that job?
Yeah. It happened. And then little by little, I started getting involved and started selling, grams here and there. And then
where would you find it? There was people that had it.
There were people that there were people that we will not be getting into those.
Limitations.
We will not be having those conversations.
We're not
getting into there because somebody might be visiting me tonight. But yeah,
you knew where to find it.
I knew where to find it.
And you literally started selling drugs. So I don't know if we could. If we could, I think it would be cool to put up some of your old pictures. But then you turned 17, 18. And I've seen pictures of you at church when you were younger, where you now started showing up with the rings and the chains. And that transition happened where you became a Miami boy through and through.
Miami boy through and through.
Yeah, you had the chains, the rings. So you're still attending church, but you are now living this life.
I'm living this life. Zor and I started, I met Zor at church.
That's right. You guys met at a
church. Zor and I have known each other for 45 years.
Wow.
And we've been together for it's going to be 42 years this year.
Wow.
And so Zor and I met at church, and when I was 15, and Zor's 4 years older than me, we started dating. She was 19, I was 15. I show up at her house in Kendall in my dad's car. Come on, girl.
Here you are with the rings and chains.
The rings, the chains. And Zor was like, what are you doing? And Zor never approved of it. I mean, Zor was... but
you're living this double life.
I'm living this double life.
Yeah.
And... we're going to church, and one night I get visited by the Holy Spirit. I can't even remember what it was, but I wind up knocking on Melquiades's door at like 11 o'clock at night. And
you went to his house in Hialeah.
I knocked on his door at his house in Hialeah, over by North Hialeah, close to Miami Lakes. And I knocked on his door. It's 11 o'clock at night, and Gladys opened the door. Yep. And I came in and I was crying, I was sobbing. And I told him, I said, I want this to be over with. And I reached into my pocket and I brought out a vial, which back then used to be called a shotgun. And it was full of Coke. And I gave it to him and I said, I don't want this ever again. And I grabbed all my rings and all my jewelry and I took everything off and I gave it to him right on the spot. And I said, I want a new life. I want my Jesus life. Wow. And Mel at that time Melquiades was an amazing pastor, as you know, but he was a little brutal.
Rough old school,
man. And that Sunday he had
all the chains on. No, just kidding.
No, he had all the chains on, trying to fit the ring with those big barbarian fingers of his. No, that Sunday his message is on this young man that visited him and all that, and he brings out the vial.
Wow.
From the platform.
You felt like he was like putting your business out there.
Everybody, especially Zor's family that we were dating, goes like this and looks back and looks at me. Everybody knew it was me.
Yeah.
And
you felt a certain way. You felt like
I felt betrayed.
Okay.
I felt I was so disappointed and hurt that would be the case. You know, I didn't want anybody to know that, and that was
was that like the starting point of you starting to leave?
No, I left.
Wow.
I left Zor and then Zor left with me, and then that's the 180. I said, oh, okay, well then let's go do it like that. So I upped my game.
You literally then went all in.
Yeah, I went all in. I went all in because I don't know how to do anything halfway.
That's absolutely true.
So I went all in.
And you got involved in the Miami life.
In the Miami life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was the guy that everybody was waiting for at the party because I was that guy who was coming with all the, with the fun stuff. And, and it was like that.
You and Zor end up getting married?
Zor and I getting married. I was 19. Zor was 23. And and then there was a time there I went into the corporate world, and
you worked in
transportation logistics.
Yep.
Very successful, very, very successful. Big, huge accounts, huge expense account.
You were traveling.
Traveled all over.
Yeah.
I worked for Jim Crane, who was the owner of the Houston Astros. Worked for him for 18 years, and my mentor back then was a gentleman by the name of Keith Winters. He's now the CEO of the company, Crane Worldwide. And I learned all the business that I learned.
Are you at the same time that you're climbing the corporate ladder? Are you still living this Miami life?
No. At about 19, 20, when I get married, it starts ending right about there because now I need to start pursuing. It's been 4 or 5 years that I've been reckless.
Okay.
I'm away from God. I've been reckless, and now I'm getting married, and now I need to start producing.
Yeah.
So I get involved with this company. I start working for them, and I'm very successful in the company, and I start growing in the company and so forth through through the years. And the dates all are, but I worked for them for, I don't know, 18 years or something like that. And towards the end of my career, I was what I did was entertain customers, big customers. I just always made sure that everybody was happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they would come to Miami, and I would treat them like royalty, and we would go out to dinners and games and drinking and all that kind of stuff. And I got caught up in that life, in the corporate world life, and
was that kind of like a re-entry point back to the stuff that you used to do?
Yeah. And then it was very hard because I had to keep it away from my work. So, I was very successful, but this also helped. But I had to keep that away because I would have been fired if anybody would have ever known.
So you're trying to entertain the clients. You're trying to make them have a good time. Obviously, you want to hold their accounts or get their accounts. But at the same time, it's now a re-entry point into what the world you used to know at 16,
that I used to know. But now I'm older. Now I have money.
You're successful.
Very successful. Zor's at home. Zor's raising our kids. We have 3 kids.
Yeah.
It's very small.
Yeah.
Zor raises them, and I'm out 3 to 4 nights a week. I'm traveling, or I'm playing golf, or and everything is the customers.
But is that the point where the drug use started again?
Yeah. I started, different customers that wanted different things, and I started supplying them, and little by little you get caught up back in.
What do you think is, and maybe it's obvious, but is it, because some people are like, I can be around that and not fall into it. But I feel like everybody I talk to just always points like it's impossible to be around that, especially if you lean toward that or you've had an experience. It's hard to be around that kind of environment. The nightclubs or drinking, it's a big one. We've had friends that stay away from drinking for years and they start again, and little by little it almost becomes a gateway back to this dark world.
Exactly.
Was that it for you, just
Yeah.
being around that environment?
Yeah, yeah. I was part of all that, and then it towards the end, it affected my career because now I was more involved in that than in anything else. And
I feel like sometimes it's better to be maybe as rigid and as disciplined and be like, if that means I can't go out with some friends.
I had to drop a
Yeah.
lot of friends.
Yeah.
A lot of friends that were really good friends of mine, but I couldn't be around it. I quit smoking at the age of 39. I've been smoking cigarettes since I was 15 or 16, whatever that was. And then I quit doing drugs. Coke basically was my thing. In '08.
Wow.
In '08, I got a call from God,
Yeah.
and God kept pushing on my heart.
Like you know, God was calling you.
Oh, you know.
So this whole time, you're climbing the corporate ladder. Zori's raising your 3 boys. You're trying to produce for the family. You're making good money. You're being successful, but you're out a lot because you have to entertain. You have to go grab
Exactly.
these accounts. You're traveling. How's your marriage looking like then? You have Tommy, Daniel, Michael, 3 young boys at home. Was the marriage overall pretty good, healthy? Or did you see like some of the stuff just started messing around with?
I thought so. But
You thought it was good.
apparently,
Yeah.
apparently,
Yeah.
my wife, brought up to my attention many years later that it wasn't as
Yeah.
hunky-dory as I thought.
Yeah, you're just producing. You're making money for the family. You're thinking everything's all good at home.
So we have a marriage. Things are different now,
Yeah.
and we understand it. But we have a marriage where it's old school. I produce, I bring home the bacon, and you fry it up in the pan.
Yeah.
And that's the way that we've always been. She had the privilege of being a stay-at-home mom, and raise our boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, my success came at a price of always not being at home, and it came to a point where, I'm a very militant person, so I would come home, but when I came home, I wanted things to be my way because now I was tired. So on Saturday, Zor wanted to go out somewhere, but I'm exhausted. I've been drinking and entertaining all week and restaurants and all things. Zor's at home.
Yeah.
She hasn't been anywhere. So Saturday, she wants to go somewhere. Friday night, she wants to go out to dinner. I'm like, So it started taking a toll through the years. And what winds up happening is that kids come into the picture overnight. Aria was born, and then she's slowly growing. Mm-hmm. And her growing process will be 18, 20 plus years. But the day that she leaves overnight. And young parents don't understand that when your kids start leaving and it's just you and your wife, that time now has to be, you have to cover that time with something else. And what it is that memories come into the picture. And, my oldest son, Tommy got married when he was 20. He got married very young.
Wow.
And, our kids were not happy. I thought, so my dad was never around when I grew up. Never. My dad worked, and my dad was never part of anything that I had to do in my life. So I made it a point that I wasn't going to be that type of dad. Don't get me wrong. My dad is the most amazing human being that was. Yeah. I loved and adored my dad.
But he was just a hard worker.
My dad worked all the time. Yeah. And so I said, I'm not going to be like that.
Okay, so although you were out, you were still present.
I was present. I coached Little League Baseball. I helped coach football. Whatever the kids needed or wanted, they got involved in karate.
But you said something now. You said, but they were not happy. What does that mean?
It turns out that they weren't happy because of me thinking that I was part of all this, taking them to karate, baseball on the weekends and all that stuff. I thought that I was doing such a better job than my father because I was present. But I was present, but I was also a raging maniac when things didn't go the way that I wanted them to go. when things were out of place. I wanted to come home and I wanted a peace. And you're growing up with kids and you know that there's no peace. Kids want to have fun.
Yeah.
So through the years, when my boys started getting older, I started realizing, not even back then, I started realizing that they were becoming men, but I wasn't willing to let that go, and there came a time in our marriage, back in 20, I want to say it was 2019. We've been married now. Zora and I have been married for 30 years, 30 plus years, 32 years, something like that.
By this point.
In this time.
19, yeah.
And like my kids are all grown up.
Yeah, they're men already. Yeah.
They're men. They're not little kids anymore. And we were playing Monopoly on a Sunday at the house, and the game the boys were being boys. They wanted to win, like I wanted to win, like everybody wanted to win. I just took it too far out, and I raged. But I raged probably for the last time, where everybody got up and they left.
Done.
Literally, I went upstairs, and I closed the door to my room, and I was there. And everybody left the house. Literally, everybody was gone, and
including Zori.
Including Zor. And Zora was gone the whole day, and she came back that night. And she spent the night, and we slept in separate rooms. And in the morning, I went to go work. Mind you, I'm working at church. Mm-hmm. I'm a pastor. Mm-hmm. All this is going on, and Zora gets up and grabs all her stuff. Michael comes into the house. He grabs all his stuff. Daniel had already bought his own place. He was living on his own. And they left. And they didn't come back. And I thought, a couple of days, so forth. A couple of days came and went, and nobody was coming back. Nobody was coming back, and nobody was taking my calls. So I was at home by myself, and it was like, whoa. And about a week and a half, 2 weeks into this, I made a decision that I wasn't going to allow this to continue. I knew now that it was me. So Diana comes into my office, and Steph, that were the two hardest ones on me, and you, but them, and I would have somebody in my office, and they would come in and go, you can't talk to people like that. And all the time I thought, who I was good, but it's not who I should have been. And that's
a good line. Who I was is not who I should have been.
Yeah.
Because you think, I have 20, 30 years of being this person. Now you're telling me something's wrong in the way I'm talking to people or the way I'm expressing. Sometimes we're not self-aware. Who I was is not who I should have been. There's a lot of self-reflection and honesty that has to happen in those processes. And I know you went, we're going to get into it now, but that was a 2-year process that you started. Wow. Let's go back really quick. You said that, that night you guys are playing Monopoly, you rage. You mentioned before how you used to get home and have these temper moments. Had that been most of your life that you've been like that? I know you told me you've even we used to go to Hurricane games or Dolphins games, and you would end up in fights. Was fighting part of your life? And do you think that just became a way of you having to survive? Maybe your dad being out of the picture because he was working so much. So I don't know. Why do you think that stemmed from?
When I was young, I fought a lot. A fight that I got into that is still till today very vivid in my life. My best friend was, his name was Pancho, and I was 13 or 14 years old, and we got into it, and I got upset, and I punched him in the throat. And I punched him in the throat where they had to take him to the hospital. I almost killed him at that young age.
Wow.
And I remember that day like if it was yesterday. And that day I realized that, man, maybe I can't do that. I can't do that. And I got into a bunch of fights through all my
It
years.
was just a part of it.
It was part of it. And the thing is that the more you fight, the more it becomes normal. And it's not a big deal, you know. So what wind up happening is that I would get upset, and instead of physically doing something, I would rage because I had to come out somewhere. I would punch a hole in a wall. I would, it would the things around me suffered. I never laid hands on my wife or the kids or stuff like that in a rage. But I raged. I couldn't see. I would foam.
Wow.
And everybody was tired of that. It gets old. It gets old. And my family, it got old, everybody having to walk on eggshells around me. Oh, here it comes. My kids, when I would come home, the kids would go upstairs. They went into their own world because they were just a minute away from me telling them something.
Is it because you just wanted to control? Like, I just wanted to control the way things went at home, or if your life, at any point in your life, I just wanted to control the environment. So anger was the way you did it.
You get caught up. You get caught up in things in life as you grow older, and you wind up realizing that you're not happy, but you don't know that you're not happy. You think you're happy because you have all these bunch of things, but you all those things don't lead up to anything. All that money that I used to make back then, that money would come and go because we had parties all the time at the house because that's how we stayed happy. That's how I stayed happy. And we were blocking out all the other issues, the underlying issues that we had. You know, the fact that
just covering
layers upon layers of covering, and you know,
buy
Zor
the house
wasn't
with the
happy.
pool and you cover parties and you cover. Yeah.
You go and you buy the BMW and you cover, and you go, and all those things. There was nothing. Don't get me wrong. I was never a rich guy or anything like that, but we were fine.
Yeah.
And through the years, resentment starts building up. It's building up. Resentment builds up in any relationship, in every marriage. If it goes long term, the resentment starts building up. When the kids start leaving the house,
and if you don't address it,
the resentment grows even more.
Yeah.
And then you come to a place where you have a game of Monopoly and you explode.
Yeah.
And you know, I was the man at work. I was the producer at work. I was ranked number 13 in the world in sales. So, you know, I had an expense account that I could do anything. I had a 67-foot yacht in Coco Plum that, you know, that was at our call for the sales guys to take customers out. My boss owned the Floridian up in Palm Beach, the golf course. So it was, I was the man. My boss used to call me the peacock because I walked around at work like the big chest and anything. And then when I came home, you know, there was things needed to be done. The kids were this, and now it's like, hey, wait a minute. I'm the king. I'm the man. Don't you guys know that? You need to treat me differently. I should be treated like royalty. And Zora's like, buddy, royalty. You don't understand. Get in there and do some laundry, brother.
Yeah.
And and all that happens through the years.
Yeah.
And that day when we had when that explosion happened, Zor left. Like it was a movie. I came home and the closet was empty. And I went into the kids' rooms and the closet were empty. And I was me by myself. And like 2 weeks into it, I went to Celebrate Recovery, which we had at church, and I said everything. I said, Zoe and I are separated, and it's because I'm an animal. You know, I rage, I struggle with rage and all that, and I got involved in a 12-step. I started doing my 12-step, and then I went to go see the master of disaster, Mr. Ernie.
Yeah, he's been
which we all love,
for
and
all of us. Yeah,
and I knew I was starting up a business back then of road work and asphalt. And this was just before COVID, when nobody knew anything about COVID. And I had been working it for about a year in the Caribbean. And my cousin had a place in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico, beautiful. And I said, I'm going to sell the house here, and I'm going to move out there, and I'm going to build the business in the Caribbean. And
you were already planning.
Planning this. I said, nobody wants to talk to me, so be it. So I started seeing Ernie and so forth, and I realized, I went out to lunch with my oldest son, which was the only one that kept talking to me. And I remember having a conversation with him and telling him, please don't take Max, my grandson, don't take him from me. And he was like, Pop, I'm not, but you got to change. And I told him, I think I'm going to move to Puerto Rico, and it's going to be better for everybody. And he told me, is it going to be better for Max? Is it going to be better for me? He says, I'm not going anywhere. You're going to leave us? And I said, whoa, man. And that broke my heart. But I mean, it crushed me. And I made the decision right there and then that I was going to fight. Excuse me. That I was going to fight for my family. That I was not. I wasn't going to be this guy that came back and I had missed all my grandkids growing up, meeting them for the first time at the age of 75, because now I've toned down and now I'm going to spend the last few years of my life, rekindling something that I could have had all along. So I made that decision, and I started seeing Ernie on a weekly basis. Yeah. And there were days that I was upset. There was a day that I almost got into a fight in the middle of the street on 152nd Street. And the guy came up to my window, and I was thinking to myself, bro, you have no clue. You have no clue. If I get out of this car,
it's over for you.
It's over for you. And I that happened, and I was on my way to Ernie's, and I said, I'm not going to go, and I wound up going, because I had made the decision that
I'm going no matter what.
I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to give it my all. There's nothing that I'm not going to do to get my family back. And I did. I had a conversation with Daniel about a year and a half, almost 2 years into the process. We had a conversation which...
You and Zora separated this whole time.
2.5 years. Zora
You're
and I
by
are separated.
Yourself in this house.
2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases, by myself. And I don't want to go anywhere because I don't want anybody to ask me. Everybody's at church, hey, where's Sodi at? And the only ones that know pretty much is staff, what's going on, what's real. And I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to talk to anybody. And what was amazing was you and Dee would come over every Tuesday. We would have dinner together for almost 2 years. Mm-hmm. It was either at your house or at my house. We had Vlad was another one that, the guys, the people that came around me, Yuli, my brother Yuli, that was always there, and it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was amazing. I had an amazing support. Kenny, Petey, playing golf with me all the time, and I started getting community, which I never had, and I was able to start talking to the guys about conversations that guys don't have. Because men are very prideful. We are, we got it. But we don't want to deal with things until we have to deal with things. And then I can tell you personally that when you have to fix the car, it's going to be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
When you have to fix your marriage, it's going to be a long road of pain that you're going to have to. Instead of coming along.
Yeah, every once in a while, having those tough conversations, checking in, having moments of self-reflection, but you wait 20, 30 years, now there's a lot more to do.
There was so much more to do.
Yeah.
So much more to do. And, there's young couples in our church that, get counseling with the pastors. And some of them come and sit with me and do their finances. And, man, those kids are, you can see that they have a platform, a foundation for success. It doesn't mean that it's going to be success, but they're doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. They're doing things the right way. And it was 2.5 years, and towards the end of, I used to call Zora and I would tell her, I need you. I need you. And Zora's like, yeah, self-soothe, buddy.
Wow.
Get over it.
Wow.
And I remember
She wanted nothing.
Nothing to do with me. She walked into my office. She gave me all the credit cards. She signed off our company. We have a company. She told me, I don't want
Basically
any.
getting ready for a divorce.
I don't want anything.
Yeah.
I don't want anything from you. I don't want no money. I don't want nothing. And I was like, whoa.
Let's go back. And I don't want to go back too much, but there's a moment where, like you said, at this point, you guys are pastors, basically, on our staff, going through this separation. But there's a moment there that I want to go back to where you were living this life in the corporate America, entertaining guests, doing all these things. But there's another coming to God moment in your life. How'd you end up going back to God into ministry? You're being successful in corporate America. Although you are the king at business, you're trying to be the king at home. There's a moment there where God confronts you.
December 7th, 2008. December 22nd, 2008. We just finished playing golf. God has been tugging in my heart. We go play golf. We come back. We have drinks. And we start doing drugs. Zora's at home. I call her and I tell her, hey, I'm not coming home tonight. I can't drive. And then next morning I show up. I come home, but I'm sick. That time that I did drugs was different from any other time. Something was going on in my body that I had never experienced before. And I came home and I remember she says, I'm leaving. And I said, please don't. I said, I'm not doing well. She says, yeah, I can't be here. And she walked out the door and she left. And I got on my knees in the bathroom and I prayed to God and I said, I couldn't sleep that night. And I said, let me sleep for 5 hours. And when I wake up, I will serve you for the rest of my life. And I went to bed and I fell asleep. I fell asleep for 5 hours. And on the 5th hour, Zora walked in through the door. And I went up to her and I told her, from this day forward, me and my house will serve the Lord.
Wow.
And that was December 27th, 2008.
Wow.
And ever since then,
never looking back at drugs again. Never went back to that world.
Nothing.
You guys started going to church.
We started going to church.
Almost like you went back to when you were 13 years old.
Yeah.
Why I bring up this whole thing is because although you go back to church, you give your life to God again, right? You like, okay, Lord, I'm going to serve you. Me and my house are going to serve you. You still have this underlying anger issue. And I think a lot of people think that, you come to God and everything's okay. And it's like, no, wait. We talked about this example before, and I talked about it a few weeks ago at church. Jesus brought Lazarus out of the grave, but then you got to get the grave clothes off. And there's things you got to do. You got to work on. It's that process of sanctification where you're kind of like, okay, I'm back walking with Jesus. I gave him my whole life. That doesn't mean there's no work you got to do. There's some work you got to do. So here you are, 2008. You come back to God, you and your family start going to church, you start getting involved at Calvary, but there's still some work that basically you were ignoring. There's still some grave clothes that needed to come off. There's still some issues that you needed to go to a Christian therapist. Thank God for Ernie. There's still some things that you needed to work out. How many people have we met that are just kind of like, well, they're not going to church, but their marriages are a mess. And God is opening up all these doors of opportunity. It's his grace. It's his goodness. You start serving. You come on staff. But there's still this issue that God's like, I'm trying to work this thing out in your life. And here I am. I'm opening up doors, but don't ignore it because otherwise it will blow up in your face.
It's going to blow up in your face. And I remember you preaching many a times. There's some of you in here that your life is a disaster at home. But when you come and you park in the parking lot, it's like, hey, it's Sunday, Jesus. And hey, how you doing, guys? And I remember you saying that, and never in my wildest dream till I heard it from my kids.
Thinking it was you.
I never thought that was me.
Wow.
I never imagined that was me. I mean, I I had done a full 180 again, and notice in my life how God speaks to me always in a secluded place by myself. I come to meet him when I'm 11 years old
11 in your room.
in my room by myself with nobody. And when I come back home as the prodigal son, it's in my bathroom in my house by myself.
Yeah.
So God has this way of dealing with me privately by myself. Excuse me. And it was because I was back in church. Now I'm on staff.
Yeah.
I have to be doing everything right. I work for God.
Yeah. It seems like everything's okay.
We're on staff. Everybody's happy. Everybody's is doing great.
Yeah, because I think your issues were not these outside issues that everybody noticed. And even you were blind to them because it wasn't like, some other people are getting drunk every night or whatever it may be. Your issues were a temper thing.
Yeah.
So you're like, God's opened up these doors. I'm on staff. Now I'm one of the pastors. I'm the CFO. I'm doing good. I don't know until your family doesn't start telling you. And even still, it's like, what do you mean? I'm good.
I'm listening, but I'm not hearing what they're saying. And it's going right through me. It's like, I'm a very busy guy. I got a lot of stuff going on. The pressure, all these things are going on at church. But then when it happens, is when you realize what just happened. And I thought that me coming back to church, the work was done.
Yeah, that's it. I'm good. I'm back home.
I'm back home.
Yeah.
Never did I think of addressing the character issue.
Why I love your story, one of the things I respect so much about you is that those 2.5 years, you went from being this Louis, because when me and Diana became part of Calvary, we started getting involved. I can tell you were a leader. You're a leader. You like things done a certain way. And obviously we didn't know some of the underlying things at home, but I'm like, okay, Louis, a leader. I can see the way you address people. And that's the stuff that you talk about when either Diana or Steph or me were walking through your office, like, hey, can you talk to people a bit differently? But I get it. You were just A-type personality, a leader, which some of that is amazing. Little things you need to change. But in those 2.5 years, there's a moment there where you finally start accepting, realizing you became so self-aware and you became a different Louis. I feel like you've gone through almost like a new birth. I tell people the Louis that you are today is not the Louis I knew back in 2014, 2013. What is that like when you find, because even at the beginning when Zori left, when Mikey left, Daniel left, all of that, there was still those first few months where you're like, I'm not moving like my ground. Like I haven't done anything wrong. What do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, no, she wants to get a divorce. It's fine. But then little by little, you started having this self-reflection, self-aware. What is that like? Because I think some of us don't know what that's like. There's a lot of us that can't do that.
Yeah.
What helped you do? What was that whole process like?
It was a desire to pursue my family and to pursue God. So in that time frame, I was by myself. There were days that I didn't speak to anybody for days. That when I would open my mouth to talk, and this happens also in the pandemic. I go through the pandemic. So
we're not at the office working.
We're not at the office anymore. I'm at home by myself. There's no golf. There's no nothing. Can't go do anything. And I am left with me by myself. And in that process, I started realizing, man, I need to change.
Was there a moment you remember there?
There was a moment, I couldn't tell you where, but there was a moment where I realized everybody's telling me that I'm wrong. There has to be something wrong with me. These are all people that I do life with, that I respect and love. And they're telling me, man, look, this is what you're doing and it's wrong. And I wouldn't see it. I remember a day you and me and Dee being in the Suburban, me being in the back seat, and me screaming at the top of my lungs to you, telling you, I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Wow, I remember that. That's right.
You remember that day?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to. I just don't see it. When I do it, I don't see it. So I had to go and I had to spend a lot of time with God saying, show me. Show me. And I shared with you before that with Sori, I kept telling her, hey, I need you. And Zora was like, no, you got to self-soothe. And you know, I don't need you. And I remember towards the end, after 2 years, that my eyes had been open to the way that I was before and the man that I was not anymore. I remember calling her and telling her, hey, I don't need you anymore, but I love you and I would love to try to do this again. But if you don't want to, I understand, and let's move forward with our lives. But this is where I'm at. To just touch on that you're talking about being, I remember back in the old days, before you became lead pastor, we would have, and this is, I shared this with the guys up in Georgia when we weren't up there. I remember being in the pastor's meeting, and when something got out of control, there was a saying that was said, hey, release the Kraken. And it was for me to get involved in that because of my character and the way that I was. And I remember being in a pastor's meeting, and we were kidding around and we were all joking around. And somebody said, hey, maybe it's time to release the Kraken. And you said, that term will never be used here again. Collazo is not a Kraken. That's not who Collazo is. And that will never be used here again. And I remember that day, and it was like, wow, I am so grateful that that's not who I need to be here. And it's things like that have started changing my life, where, you know, people come into my office now and it's a matter of a hug. It's a matter of love. And it doesn't say that I'm not who I am at the core, but the transfer of information is not the same way that it used to be. I haven't had a rage moment. I've gotten upset.
Yeah, anybody can get
Everybody
upset.
gets upset. I've gotten upset, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever want to know that guy that was like that. And, you know, my wife and I, we just booked our Italy trip this year.
Hey, let's
So,
go.
yeah, we're traveling now. You know, we love to be around each other. We love to be around each other now. Zor loves to be around me.
Yeah.
Because it's the man that she's always loved, but she's never had.
Wow. That is profound.
And so now we get to do things. And even when there's disagreements,
Which are going to happen.
they're going to happen. We've been together for 42 years.
Yeah.
There's moments that we disagree, but now there's a conversation.
I want to talk about labels really quick because I didn't even remember that story about the Kraken. And now that you retell it, yeah, I remember there was this label on you like, oh, Louis will go handle that situation. And you would be the one that would come and be a certain way and handle something that was going on, whether it was on staff, with an employee or a church or business related, whatever it is. And I had a different perception of you. And I think we shouldn't put labels on people. We've all placed labels on ourselves, or people have placed labels on us. And it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to accept that. And in that moment, I'm like, wait, no, I know Louis, and I know there's gold in there. And I don't want him to carry this label. We're a church.
Yeah.
We're God's people. We're God's family. Doesn't mean that we don't have moments of correction. Doesn't mean we don't go and address certain things, but that's not going to be our culture. And the way that you are now, before everybody was like, oh, you're getting called into Collazo's office. Something must be going on. Now that doesn't even exist anymore. It literally doesn't exist. Here we are, 8, almost 9 years later, that doesn't even exist. Your office is a place of joy, of light. We go in there and sit there and look at your fish tank.
My fish
And
tank.
it's a beautiful, peaceful
There's
office.
chocolate on the table.
Yeah, but it's all, I think, a reflection of your soul.
Thank you, bro.
You've changed. But you did the hard work. And I think we want to avoid the hard work. We want to, we look at the mess. It's like when people come over the house and you throw everything in a drawer and you're like, all right, so there's nothing going on here. You open that drawer and it's almost like, I never want to see that again. All we do is just, the mess is still there.
It's still there.
And you did the hard work of opening up the drawer and saying something must be wrong with me because people are telling me it's me. I'm doing something. It's the way I address people. It's the way I talk. It's the way I carry myself. It's the way I view myself. It's my self-perception. And you did the hard work of opening up that drawer and saying, wait, okay, what is it? Is it stuff from my childhood? Is it stuff that I was growing up? Why am I this aggressive? Why do I get this way? And you started doing the hard work. 2.5 years. I remember those last 6 months before you and Zori got back together. I just started seeing a different Louis. I started seeing a Louis that was so kind, humble. The ego was gone. The pride was gone. It was a different, and not saying that, again, in staff and at church, you weren't this monster, but you were just a man who was assertive, aggressive. You were to get things done while we were trying to still navigate. And here you are now. I see a different Louis.
Yeah, and the man, I learned that the man, Ernie would tell me, you're a hunter, you're a protector, and that will never change. It's just the way you go about, the way that I go about now in having a conversation with somebody or correcting them, because I still have to do that.
Yeah.
There's this moment, you have to come into my office or we need to go sit somewhere, and correction has to come. But correction doesn't come from a place of anger. It comes from a place of love.
Yeah. You've taught me, doesn't matter how old you are, you can still learn again.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you went through a whole relearning process. And here you are now, basically with a brand new life.
Completely new life.
You and Zori traveling the world, the way you lead our staff, part of our executive team, it's a new man. And so I want people to understand it's never too late to learn again.
Never too late. And giving up is never the answer, because you don't realize that you're giving up now, but you're going to want it back later. When later comes, what you get is not the same product that you can get now. If you do the work, right now, I just came back last month from Houston, where Daniel, invited me to go watch the Dolphins over there. All expenses paid. We had a weekend that was
father and son weekend. That was incredible.
It was amazing. The relationship that I have with Mikey, the relationship that I have with Tommy, my kids call to be around me now.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get together, Pop. Let's go do this. And it's just a whole different. It's a whole different. Monopoly is not allowed in our household anymore. But we play different games. We play different games now.
Anything but Monopoly.
Anything but Monopoly.
Your life, to me, it shows me that if we drop our pride, if we drop our ego, if we are humble enough to hold a mirror in front of us, God's word, and we grab that and we say, okay, Lord, what isn't in me that I need to change? What isn't in me? Yeah. God will give you back all that the enemy stole. And I think for 2.5 years, the enemy tried stealing your family, your future. The enemy tried stealing any kind of hope, God's call over your life. The enemy wanted to destroy and kill what you and Zori had built. And because you didn't hold on to pride, because you took the route of humility, look what God has done.
Yes.
He's giving you double for your trouble. Mm-hmm. And that which the locust and the cankerworm and everything that the word of God says tried to steal and eat and rob and destroy, God has given you now double for your trouble.
Amen.
And you guys are such a beautiful family.
Yes,
what a story of restoration. What a story of God's hand over your life. Again, none of us are there yet. None of us are
never
perfect,
will arrive.
but we'll continue to learn. Yeah. I know we've gone a little long, but if we can just close off, if you can look in the camera, and maybe there's some men like you in their 40s, 50s, 60s that are kind of like, well, maybe they've lost their family already. Maybe they're on the other side of a divorce already, or maybe they're going through what you went through. If you could just leave them one piece of advice, what would you tell them? What
I would say is, it doesn't matter what stage you're in, whether you are divorced, you're getting ready to get divorced, if you fight for real and your desire is to get your family back and you seek God first and humble yourself through it, God will do the miracle. There will be peace in your life. There will be peace in your family's life. 100%.
Thank you, Louis. I love you. Me and Dan are eternally grateful for you and
I love you
Zori.
guys.
Thank you for this.
You're
Thank you
awesome,
for
man.
coming and having this conversation. I love you very much. We got to continue this conversation. We got
Yes.
to continue this conversation, and we're going to do a part 2. And maybe we'll bring Dan and Zori for the next one.
Oof.
Hey, always remember, if you change yourself, you can change your world.